Today's Stevie Wonder's 70th birthday, and back in the mid-80s, a young Steve Levine found himself in a California studio with Stevie, and producer Steve Levine is with me now. Steve, there's no real way of modestly downplaying this. You were in LA recording with the Beach Boys, weren't you?
That's absolutely true, and this entire thing is going to be a name-drop clang.
Which album was it that you were doing with the Beach Boys?
Well, at the time it didn't have a title, and it's become known as the 1985 Beach Boys album because it literally just says The Beach Boys on the front of the cover. And in fact, they'd never had an album in their entire history called The Beach Boys.
And how was Stevie Wonder involved?
Well, as you mentioned, I was working at Westlake Studios in Los Angeles. That's on Beverly Boulevard. It's a very famous studio. It'd been used by Michael Jackson very recently to record Off the Wall album, and many of the Shalimar and Whispers records were there. So the fact that Stevie knew we were at that studio, I think, is incredible. So I literally got a call. The receptionist at the studio said, Steve, Stevie Wonder's on the phone for you. And I thought initially it was like some of the crew just having a joke. So I picked the phone up and he goes, "Hi, it's Stevie here." And it's like sharp intake of breath. You know, Stevie Wonder is one of my all-time heroes and is just, you know, the word genius is used quite a bit for people, but he really is. So he said to me, "I know you're in the studio at the moment. I've got a technical question. I've just bought 2 Lindrums." Now, the Lindrum was brand new technology, incredibly expensive, and I was very fortunate to have a Lindrum. They didn't make that many of the original Lindrum, I think only about 500. Stevie had 2 of them. Prince had one, and there were a few other producers with them. But he said to me, "Steve, here's the problem I've got. I'm using one for my drum track, you know, kick, snare, hat, and all that sort of thing. But the Lindrum also has great percussion, congas, tambourines, etc." He said, "I want to run both of those together, but I can't lock them together. Do you know how to do it? Can you come up to the house and show me?" So I said, "Well, I can come tomorrow." So we drove to Stevie's house. There was myself and Julian Lindsay, who was doing some of the keyboards on the project. So he said, "Okay, that's fantastic." And he did a quick demonstration to me of a song he was working on, and it was, you know, he was really pleased. He said, "Are you looking for any songs for the Beach Boys album?" And I said, "Why, have you got any?" And he said, "Yeah." So he said, "Well, let me play you one." So the story is, I said to him, "Well, look, if you can come and play everything on the track, I'm sure I can convince them." And so Stevie said, "Okay, here we go. Here's the song." Now, fortunately, in those days, people used to record everything to a cassette, and I have the cassette that Stevie gave me of the demo song. So do you want to hear a little bit of it?
Of course.
So I've just edited a little bit in for you because there's a whole conversation at the front, which is quite private, and there's a little bit at the end, which is private. But here's essentially the start of the song. Now, bearing in mind, this is 100% Stevie. The Lindrum is playing, or both his Lindrums now, because I've managed to lock them together in sync. Plus, he's playing a Fender Rhodes piano and he's singing live. This is completely live, direct into a cassette.
Okay, here we go.
Say you do. I wanna spend my whole life with you. I never knew love could be so good. When you say you care, I wanna be right there beside you and show the
Okay, wow. That's Stevie Wonder playing direct to cassette in what, 1984?
Yes, yeah. So everything you can hear there is essentially that great thing that Stevie does. You know, the way he plays the Fender Rhodes, the way that he sings, all one take.
And I assume that's never been heard before.
No, not outside of the private world that we had, because I played that cassette to Carl Wilson, who then played it to the band. So the next thing we needed to do was organise a session, because Carl said to me almost the same thing. Well, if Stevie will play on the track, that would be a great coup for the album.
So what did Stevie do for the album in the end then?
So we organised a session. Stevie came to Westlake Audio and we started recording the entire track. Again, as everyone knows what Stevie does, he played every instrument on that track. I added a couple of tiny things after he'd finished, but essentially the meat and potatoes of the track, the Lindrum, the bass, the keyboard parts, his fabulous harmonica, all Stevie Wonder. And we just literally recorded. It took about 6 or 7 hours maybe to do the backing track. And then I presented it to the band. Stevie also did a guide vocal on the backing track for the band to learn the song on the new track. And then a few days later, the Beach Boys added their vocals.
And Stevie, I assume, as nice a guy as you could ever wish to meet.
Well, it's, people say don't meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed. Stevie was the complete opposite of that. He was absolutely incredible to work with. One of the things that you do when you program the Lin is you start with a 1-bar pattern and then you build your song up from that. But you can also copy patterns. So, for example, you can do a basic kick snare pattern and copy that 2 or 3 times to make 4 bars or whatever you want. But when you copy, it's the button that you use to copy is right next to the erase button. And I was so nervous that Stevie said to me, "Can you copy that pattern 4 times?" And then as I pressed the erase button and it went beep. Do you want me to record that again then? Because he knew. I mean, that's the thing. He knew that I just made a mistake. Anyway, it's fantastic working with him. It was a real pleasure. And then a couple of weeks later, he phoned me and said, "Are you happy with the track? Have you got everything you need? Do you need any extra overdubs?" I said, "No, Stevie. Absolutely fantastic." And one of the great byproducts of the technology, I was then recording on 48 track on 2 digital machines. And one of the things I had to do, in order to make sure both machines were running in sync, I would do a backing track mix of the song, which I would put on both machines just to check I was running in sync. Fortunately, I still have that. So I'm able to play you a bit of just the backing track. So these are no Beach Boys on here at all. This is entirely 100% Stevie.
And into this final version of I Do Love You, the Beach Boys with Stevie Wonder. Steve Levine, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.